What's up guys? Welcome back to the Bonsai-En YouTube channel. I'm Josh and today we're going to be working on this Cascade juniper as we move into the next growing season, getting it ready, setting it up for success, and along the way I'm going to be giving you guys some tips so that you guys can have the best success with your juniper bonsai. So let's get into it. Alright, so this particular tree that I got here next to me, I got this around 3 to 4 years ago as rough nursery stock and began the development process from there, growing it in a black plastic nursery pot. It ended up getting potted up into a cascading bonsai pot when I found one that I liked for it. Now, this tree is actually still in the development stage. But the beauty about cascading trees is because of the depth of the pots that we put them in, we can actually keep them in development while we've got them in a bonsai pot. So this tree, even though that it's in a bonsai pot, it's actually still in development, and we're still doing a lot of development work to this tree, as you can probably tell. So right now in Australia, we're coming out of winter. We've got the last month of winter ahead of us now. We're just coming into it. But the weather's starting to warm up and we're starting to look at setting our trees up for the growing season that's ahead. So we've started our repotting now of our trees, and then also we've got to look at doing some structural work to some trees that are going to be growing quite rapidly. So this particular tree here, it'll get fertilized heavy now moving into the spring season, and I need to go through and set the tree up to make sure that it's photosynthetically efficient, so meaning all the pads are getting sunlight. I need to make sure that the branches that I'm looking at growing this year, such as this particular one just here, we need to make sure that they're wired into position. But with this type of tree and the way that I'm going to be growing it, I'm really going to have to watch wire putting it on now. I usually don't recommend people put wire on in spring, but if you can keep an eye on it, then you definitely can do that. It's not something that you can't do, but if you're somebody that tends to put wire on and forget about it, it's probably not a great idea to be putting it on just before the tree is just about to explode in growth. So I'm also going to be taking a look at the nabari, which I've been slowly washing away over the last season. We'll see what's under there. If there's something that I can use, then we'll try and expose that. If I can't use it, then we'll just cover it back up in soil and use what we do have available to us already. Going to do a bit of cleaning up of the foliage. As I said, a bit of shaping, a bit of wiring. I need to move this tail out a little bit so it's not quite so straight down. That's the thing with these cascade trees. They do tend to want to grow back in towards themselves. So we need to try and push this back out so that all these pads can eventually get sunlight without being shaded out. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. The first thing I'm going to do is go through and clean up all the interior foliage, pads, and just growth that I'm not really going to need moving into the growing season. So I'll chuck you guys on a time lapse for that, because you're probably not going to want to sit there and watch me do that for the next 10 to 20 minutes. If you do want to see close up and more information on how that's done, you can go back and check out our juniper summer pruning video. Same concept that I'm doing in that video that I'm just about to do here. So let's get into it. So we've finished cleaning up the interiors of the tree now, getting rid of all that foliage that's not going to be photosynthetically efficient to the tree. So stuff that's just going to get shaded out, stuff that's on the bottom. And, you know, that kind of growth, as I've mentioned it before on my YouTube videos, it takes from the tree, but it doesn't give anything back. So you're better off getting rid of that. So as you can see, the tree looks a whole lot thinner now. The tree was being grown out just to give it a lot of energy to thicken it up quite a lot. So now we've got to go through, and a couple of things we've got to do is there's a few branches that need moving into place so that they're ready for this next growing season. I don't want the branches getting too thick before I move them. So as I said, like this one here, I've grown it out to get the length. That's why it's still long and leggy, but it's going to have to be wired into place now. So we can set the structure for that, set some structure for a few of these other branches that are long and leggy. I don't know if we'll do anything to the bottom of the tree just yet. We might move one of these bottom branches. There's a branch around the back here that needs to actually be rotated. It's actually gone sideways, so it needs a bit of wire on it and it needs to be rotated back up. And then a few little branches up in the apex need to be wired up and positioned, and we need to have a look at the root ball and see if there's anything viable in there for us for a nabari. So what I might do is I might bring the camera in nice and close now. We might have a look at the root base first, see if we can find anything. If we don't find anything in there, then we can just use what's already showing on the surface, and we can just cover that back up with soil. Eventually we will get root growth back up into that new soil. So if there's nothing there, then it's not such a big deal, but if we do uncover a nice nabari, then all the better for the design in the future. So I'll bring you in nice and close, we'll have a look at the root base and see if we can do anything there. Alright, so I've got you nice and close in now on the base of the tree here. So basically, as you can see, we've got all these roots on top that we've just been letting erode away over the last season. So hopefully under here, so like you can see a little bit of a root starting here, hopefully we can keep uncovering this and give us a nice root flare, and we'll see what else we've got underneath all this. As you can see, I'm just poking it and it's very loose. All these roots are dead. So we're going to start to remove these. You can see just here, we've got an old toothpick and what was an organic tea bag for fertilizer. So we'll get rid of that out of there. And need to just start gently pulling these roots away and seeing what's up under here. You know, sometimes you can really strike gold under the soil surface when it comes to root flare and nabari, and sometimes you just get nothing. You come up short. So as you can see, we're starting to get a bit more just down here. So now we're getting a line that comes down here and now back down this way. So we've uncovered a little bit already. So I'll just keep removing some of these dead roots here. These actually do tear off quite easily. Now I need to come in with my root scissors, and any roots that I can see that have no viable root tips, so they're completely dead, I'm going to actually remove because they're going to be no use to the tree. And then there are some roots that I can see that still do have a viable root tip down in the soil. So we may be able to make use of those and continue to grow them out for our root flare at the bottom of the tree. So I just want to remove some of this other stuff that I know is dead for sure. Alright, so as you can see, I've gone through and done a little bit of work in here. We've uncovered some small roots such as this one here, so we can grow this out eventually. We've got more roots over here. So with these smaller ones, when the time comes, so not at the moment necessarily, but we can actually repot this tree. We can go right down into the root system, find where these roots terminate, see what's useful on the root, give it a bit of a chop, and then once we bring it back up to the surface, we can actually reposition it. So we'll be able to reposition this one, we'll be able to reposition this one here. So we've got this big root that comes right off the back of the tree, and it splits off and goes down into here. And then over here, you can see a bit of wire on here, so I've actually taken this root and stretched it right out to the back of the pot. And we actually do have some other roots. They're just out of camera shot. I can't even get the chopstick to bring it into view there. You can just see it on the end of the chopstick there. So these are some crossing roots that once I repot the tree, once again I'll be able to bring them into a position that is more favourable to the design. But also too, we've got smaller roots like this that are still terminated off into the soil, so they're still viable for the tree. And I've uncovered some thicker roots at the back, and once again some other stuff up here that you can't really see. So basically this little operation that I've just done here, I've uncovered some roots, and this is going to be the start of our nabari. So this is the start of building the root flare for the tree in development. And then hopefully in a couple of years, we'll have nice thick roots coming down here, nice thick roots coming off this side, and a nice big spread. And we're going to have most of our longer roots coming off the back of the tree here. So this is the back side of the tree. And then on the front side of the tree, we'll have some really short compressed roots up in there. But for now, let's move back around to the front of the tree and focus on some wiring and moving some branches. Alright, so now we're back around the front side of the tree. Earlier in the video, in the intro, I mentioned that one of the things we needed to do was get this tail and move it forward. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I turn this tree sideways, so we're looking at the side view of the tree, you can see the Cascade tail is straight up and down. And basically, if the sun's over the top, all your top pads up here are going to be shading out the ones down the bottom. And you can already tell this is happening because these pads down the bottom, they're very sparse, okay? And you can also tell by the growth. On a juniper, when it gets a lot of sun, the growth really tightens up. When it's been shaded quite a lot, the growth opens right out. You know, that growth is really trying to catch all the sunlight that it possibly can. So it's making its foliage as open as possible, so it's got the most chance of catching sunlight. Whereas all the stuff that's being kept in the sun is really tight and compact, okay? So you can even tell when you look at the underside of your pads and you look at the growth that's under there, and you can see the growth is really splayed out and opened up. And all the stuff that's on top of the pad up here is nice and tight and compact. So what we need to do is we need to get this tail, and we actually need to bring it out like this, so it's out on an angle. And for this particular tree, this is going to be quite easy for me. Usually I could, get some thick wire, start at the top, wire all the way down to the bottom, and then just crank it out. But this time, I'm just going to simply take a piece of wood, and I've got a spot back here, and I can actually pull a branch out, and that should stay there just like that. And now you can see that our tail comes down on an angle rather than going straight down. And there's enough pressure here that that'll actually keep that block up against the pot. It may move every now and then. If you wanted to, you could put a little bit of wire around it just to keep it in place. or it's up to you, you could simply just wire the tree and pull it out. But either way, the concept's the same, that you want to have this tail coming out. That way every little pad that you're creating is actually getting sunlight. So all this stuff now on the bottom is actually moved out quite a little bit more. So the next mission that we're going to go through here is actually throwing some wire on some of these branches and seeing if we can get that structure set for the next growing season and get these things into place. So let's jump into that. Alright, so this is the first branch that we need to wire out. So we've got a really long leggy branch here. So the branch actually starts all the way up back here, where you can see my finger in the background there, and it terminates down here. So what my plan was for this branch is that, as you can see here, we've got a little pad going on. And then we've got this elongation that I've allowed to happen. Okay, so this has done two things. This has helped thicken the branch up just here, where it comes off the trunk. And then it thins out as we go all the way down. It thins out until we get to the bottom. So we've got nice taper on our branch here. But also, this is going to allow me to create almost like a sub pad off the same branch. So I want to move this down into this section here somewhere, so that we've got our pad here and then we step down into another pad. So what I'm going to have to do is, because I've got nothing else that I can really anchor off onto on here, because I am going to be doing some wiring on some of these smaller branches here. So I'm going to have to bring my wire all the way up to here, come over the shoulder and all the way down, and that way I can move this and then I can come back and wire this stuff up here. But remember, we always want to put our thickest wire on first and then go down in size as we're wiring. So start off with your main line and then start doing your secondaries and then your tertiaries and so on and so forth. Because you don't want to start wiring out your secondaries up here and then you've got to bring wire all the way down here, because then you're going to be crossing wire the whole way. So if we start off with our thicker wire first and then move on to our secondaries afterwards, we'll be a lot better off. So let's get some wire up onto this and see where we go from there. Alright, so I'm going to bring my wire up here and I'm just going to run it down the trunk line just here, just to anchor it off. At least 2 turns down there, okay? And then, a quick tip for you guys. If we're wiring a branch down, okay, so as you can see this one's coming down, we want to bring our wire up over the top of the shoulder. If we were to be wiring this branch upways, we would bring our wire up and under the shoulder, okay? So we'd be supporting underneath to go up and we're supporting over the top to go down. Now the next tip I've got is, I know that when I get to the bottom of this branch and I start bending, I'm bringing it towards the front of the tree, okay? Which is going to mean that when I put this wire on the tree, so I'm going to come up over the shoulder here, but the reason I'm going around this way, I'm going clockwise, is because chances are I'm going to have to twist the branch a little bit, and I'm going to actually have to twist the branch clockwise to come forward. If I was to put this on anti-clockwise, when I twisted that branch clockwise forward, it would actually loosen the wire, and that's not what we want. We want to keep that wire nice and tight. So we need to come down here in a clockwise fashion so that when we get to the bottom, we can actually twist that branch if we need to get it into place. So as we're coming down, we want to keep our pitch nice and even, and we want to keep our wire nice and tight up against the tree. We don't really want any big gaps in the wire, because that's going to cause the wire not to be anchored properly, and we can actually end up breaking parts of our trunk. So this is a good reason why we clean as well, because when we're wiring, now I don't have to try and go around a whole bunch of, growth that I wasn't necessarily going to use. I've just knocked that piece of timber out there, but that's okay. I'll put that back in after I finish this wiring, because this wiring is going to actually bump the branches around quite a bit. So as I'm just getting down closer to the tip, there's actually a bit more growth that I've left on here, so I can allow this to elongate. So I'm just feeding this wire carefully in between all that growth, trying not to damage anything. And also taking care, because as we start the branch out, it's a lot thicker, and then as we get towards the tip, it gets a lot thinner. So a lot of the times what happens is, as you get out towards the tip of the branch, the wire that you're using might be a little bit too thick for what you're actually wiring up out there at the tip. But if you're careful, then you can actually get away with it. So just making sure that you support every bend that you're making. So you're making sure that you're not, snapping things, and you don't want to just be doing this haphazardly. And, I always tell people, when you're wiring, take your time. It's not a race. Make sure you're doing it properly. Make sure that you're supporting every bend, and you'll be good as gold. That little bit of extra time that you take to support your work and do a proper job might actually save you a couple of years of regrowing a branch because you broke it. Alright, so this is the part of the branch that we actually want to move. So I'm going to support just here. So this is the part that I don't want to move, okay? This is our original pad, and then this is the extra little bit that I've grown out to create a new pad. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down a little bit, okay? And then I might just come this way a little bit just to add some movement, and then I'm going to bring this around. And for now, this is going to look a little bit funny, okay? Because we've got all this growth down here. So eventually this growth will get cut off. We'll keep it on there for now, okay? So at the moment, the tree is not going to be super aesthetically pleasing. But we'll keep this on here for now. And then we've got a split section here, so we can actually split this off into two. And just as long as we've got our basic movement that we wanted, so I'm actually going to just put a little bit more movement in this just here to make it a little bit more interesting later on. Because now is the time to really get that movement in it while it's down here. For the most part, this is unlignified growth, so it's really easy to bend and manipulate. And this is still quite young up in here as well, so at least now you can't really see up in there, but we've got movement. It moves towards the back, then it comes back towards the front, and then back in a little bit. But basically, this is where our pad's going to end up here. So it's going to be in its own set of sunlight, okay? So all this growth that's up under here, eventually we'll get rid of this, because it's going to become useless, because it's going to get shaded out by this pad just here. So that's what we've ended up with just there. Alright, so now I'm going to go through, I'll put you guys on time lapse again. I'm going to do that same kind of thing around the tree. Just going to move some branches into some different places. Then we'll come back and we'll have a look at what we've got. Alright, that's all the work that we're going to be doing on this tree today. And as you can see, it's not a finished tree, it's still a tree in development, and this is just the work that we have to do if we want to move forward and get a top quality tree. So just to recap over some of the things that I've done today to this tree, I've gone through and I've removed any growth that isn't photosynthetically efficient, meaning it gets shaded out, it's not going to be any use to us in the design. What this has done is completely opened up the tree to sunlight and air, which is also going to help us get some back budding in spring. You never know, you may get an adventitious bud pop in a spot that you could really use. So we're going to have plenty of sunlight and air into our tree now, so we know that's important. The next thing I've done is I've brought that tail out, so it's not going vertically down, it's actually coming out on an angle now. That allows all these pads as we move out to have their own bit of sunlight, which makes our branches very photosynthetically efficient, so they're getting all the sunlight that they can, and also that's going to help us get that real tight compact growth on our pads. If our pads are getting shaded out, we're not going to get that compact tight growth that we're after. I've also gone through and wired out some of the branches so that as we move into the growing season, they'll set into those positions, and then we can start to look at building our secondary branches off that. So at the moment we do have some little secondary branches here and there, and that's another thing I did in the cleaning stage. I went through and I actually selected some branches. So if you've seen our pad creation or our juniper branch development video, you'll have seen that, I've said that we let things grow out like this, and then we can come back in once we're happy with our desired thickness and start choosing branches. So there were some parts on the tree where I actually had to choose some branches ready for this growing season so I can start getting some secondary growth. Because at the moment, all this stuff is really just structural work. So it's looking okay for what it is now, but in another season or two, we're going to have much nicer looking pads, and the tree's going to look a lot more mature once we start developing out those branches. We did some work on the root base, did some work on that nabari, got some roots ready for a season or two. They will grow out. We can place them where we want them to, and we'll have a much nicer looking root flare on this tree. For now, the apex, I've got some branches set in there which I already set initially when I did the first design in this tree. So for now, I'm not going to do any more work on the apex. There's still some places in there that need some growing out, so I'm going to continue to grow them out. Once I get that growth, then I can start to wire it up a little bit more. We've got some branches at the back that I can pull up and create a little bit more of that triangle shape up here. But for now, I'm happy with the apex, because the other thing that I'm going to do as well is later on when I repot this tree, I'm actually going to lift it up a little bit. So until I do that work, I won't worry about wiring out the apex too much, because that design could change once I lift the tree up. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed today's video on this cascading juniper and some of the work that I've done moving forward into spring. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. That helps this channel grow immensely. And leave a comment down below and let me know what you would or wouldn't do to this particular tree. But until next time, enjoy your bonsai journey.